Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about onboarding new users using a gasless transaction tool. A little bit about myself. My name is Magali Morin. As you probably can hear, I am from France. On the right side of the slide, I have attached a QR code to my GitHub projects. Feel free to have a look. I am working as a backend engineer at LUKSO. LUKSO is a blockchain company based in Berlin. And at LUKSO, I've been building backend services to power decentralized applications in order to enhance the user experience on the blockchain. Why is it important to enhance the user experience on the blockchain, and why do we at LUKSO put such a focus on it? Well, nowadays, blockchain is mostly used for DeFi, and only very few people use the blockchain on a day-to-day basis. And LUKSO's objective is to revolutionize the way people interact with the blockchain. We want to develop social use cases like media, gaming, art, fashion, music on the blockchain. And for this, LUKSO came up with new standards called LUKSO Standard Proposal and new tools, like a browser extension and a gasless transaction tool that I will showcase today. So our goal is to make the blockchain more accessible and used on a day-to-day basis. And one major hurdle that prevents this from being the case today is the need for users to pay for their own transaction fees each time they want to interact with the blockchain. This hurdle doesn't exist on Web 2. Web 2 is super seamless for new users. If we take Alice as an example, she doesn't need to pay for her own gigabytes each time she uses her phone or each time she does FaceTime. It's her cell phone provider that takes care of that and that provides her with the correct amount of gigabytes each time she uses her phone. But on Web 3, the users, they need to pay for their own transaction fees each time they interact with the blockchain. And if we imagine that Alice is a total blockchain newbie, well, she needs to figure out herself how to pay for her transaction fees. And the answer to that might seem simple. She just needs to get native tokens from the blockchain. But let's take a deeper look at what that implies. Well, first, she will need to go to a centralized exchange. But if you're a total blockchain newbie, you probably have no idea what that is. So you look on the internet, you find what a centralized exchange is, you register, and then you are asked to do a KYC, know your customer process. This is a very time-consuming process. You have to gather your passport, you have to take a picture of yourself. Half of the time it doesn't work because the light is not good or you have your glasses on, so you have to do it again. Then finally you get through it and you still have to wait for a few hours or a few days for it to be validated. Then you have to create a wallet. For this you need to know about the seed phrase and you need to store it wisely. Finally you can get some native tokens and then you need to transfer them to your wallet. Well, how many of you think that a total blockchain newbie like Alice or like our parents or our grandparents can go through all these steps without feeling discouraged? Well, obviously no one. Yet this is the user onboarding experience on the blockchain today, and it represents a big barrier of entry. Today, users, they discover our DApp and they want to start using it, but they have to go through these 5 very cumbersome steps. But what we want as developers is that users discover our DApp and they start using directly. And for this, at LUKSO, we came up with a tool called a relayer service that abstracts the transaction fee away from your user. And to explain a bit more how a relayer service works, let's take an analogy with sending a letter. So we are back at Alice, who wants to send a letter to Bob. For this, Alice writes the letter, she signs the letter, and then it's going to be a third-party service called a relayer service that is going to envelope the letter, pay for the stamp, and send the letter. Well, it works the same when a third party wants to send a transaction on behalf of a user. Alice will have to create the transaction, then she will need to sign the transaction, and the third party will envelope the transaction, pay for the transaction fees, and send it to the blockchain. And in our example, Alice's key doesn't need to have any fund. She doesn't need to go through the 5 cumbersome steps we talked in the introduction, because it's going to be the third-party service that is going to pay for the transaction fees. Let's go a bit more into the details of how a third party can execute a transaction on behalf of a user. If we have a look at Alice, Alice will need a universal profile. A universal profile is one of the standards that LUKSO came up with in order to enhance the user experience on the blockchain. It's a smart account standard that represents your identity on the blockchain. It has a contract storage, so it can store all the metadata of Web 2 with the power of decentralization. Alice also needs a key manager, which is another smart contract standard that LUKSO came up with, which you can think of as a lock checker, which checks which key can interact with your universal profile. So if we take the example of Alice, she has 2 keys in her contract storage, so these 2 keys can interact with her universal profile. The pink key is allowed to interact, the white key is allowed to interact with her universal profile as well, but an unknown key will not be able to interact with her universal profile. And the key manager has the built-in functionality to relay transaction. It's this function execute relay call that any third-party service can call in order to execute a transaction on behalf of a universal profile. Then let's have a look how Alice signs the transaction. Well, for this, she's using the library EIP191 signer. That is a library I created when I arrived at LUKSO, which allows you to sign any EIP191 messages. And she uses the function sign data with intended validator, passing as parameter her key manager address, the message, and her private key. This outputs the transaction, which can be seen as something like, I am this user and I want to perform this action on the blockchain. She then sends this signature to the relayer service through a standardized API endpoint. This is a post/execute endpoint, which takes as body the universal profile address as Alice, the signature that we talked about, the nonce of the private key she used to sign the transaction, the validity timestamp, which is a time frame during which the relayer service can execute the transaction on behalf of Alice, and the ABI, which is the content of the transaction that Alice wants to execute. So she sends that to the relayer service, and then the relayer service is able to create an execute relay call transaction. So in order to create an execute relay call transaction, the relayer service is going to use the encode function data execute relay call, passing as parameter the signature, the nonce, the validity timestamps, and the ABI that Alice provided through the API endpoint. Then the relayer is going to pay for the transaction fee. For this, it will create a wallet with its own private key, which has funds, and it will sign the execute relay call transaction with this wallet. This will output a signature that it can then send very easily to the blockchain. Additionally, by hashing this signature, it can directly get the transaction hash and return it to Alice, which can inspect on a blockchain explorer if her transaction was successful or not. So by having a third party that is able to execute a transaction on behalf of a user, let's explore different and potential business models like that a DApp or like developers can put in place in order to make relayer services cost-effective or even profitable. The first business model what one can think of would be similar to a mobile phone subscription. Today, when we use our mobile, we are paying for a plan, each month we pay a certain amount of euros and we get a certain amount of gigabytes. Well, it will work the same with a blockchain subscription. You can pay a certain amount a month and you get a certain amount of gas fee capacity. And each time you execute a transaction, this gas fee gets deducted from your balance. And at the end of the month, if you don't have any more gas, you can either top it up or you can wait till the following month that it's renewed. Another example could be ad-based. You could watch an ad, so for example, this ad for the Euro Cup 2025 in Switzerland, and only once the ad is finished, you would be able to execute a transaction. So watching the ad is equivalent to paying for your transaction fees. It works like this in many modern mobile games today. A third example could be price integration. So if we imagine a football fan that is completely fan of Alexia Putellas, who is a Spanish football player, twice winner of the Ballon d'Or, well, they would see the price of the transaction fee impacted in the price of the NFTs. And like this, they will not have to care about the price of the fees, because it will be directly included in the price of the NFT they buy. So by having different business models, we enhance competition and innovation. And it's very important for users to be able to choose between different models so they can choose what best fits their needs. We really encourage developers to come up with their own relayer service and their own business models in order to offer a gasless experience to their users. So talking about that, let's see how you as a developer, you can integrate your relayer service into your decentralized application. Let's imagine a very simple DApp where, as a user, you can choose an NFT and add it as the background picture of your universal profile. As a developer, you just need to call the RPC method up_add_transaction_relayer. That is an RPC method that exists in the browser expansion we developed in order to add your own relayer service to the browser extension. Then the user will just have to click on this little drop-down, and it will open a bunch of relayers they can choose from in order to pay for their transaction fees. And like this, you very easily offered a gasless experience to your users and make sure that they use your DApp very seamlessly without having to buy native tokens. To preempt a question that comes back quite often at Ethereum conference, I wanted to make a little comparison between ERC-4337 and execute relay call. So for those that are unfamiliar with ERC-4337, it's a gas abstraction standard similar to how execute relay call is. So they both relieve users from paying for their own gas fees. They are also both compatible with universal profiles. Onto the differences, ERC-4337 implementation is a bit more complex for developers because they have to put up some bundler nodes and they also have to put up a paymaster contract. Whereas on the other side, execute relay call is quite easy. As a developer, you just need to send a transaction to the execute relay call function of the key manager of the user. For the relayer service, ERC-4337 relayer service is on-chain, as the paymaster contract is deployed on the chain, whereas execute relayer call relayer service is off-chain. It's a backend service that runs off the chain, and that because they need to sign the transaction on behalf of the users. But this has an advantage, because execute relayer call can then be DApp specific. As it's a service running off the chain, you can really easily restrict it to certain DApp to be able to interact with. Whereas with ERC-4337, as everything is running on the chain, it's more difficult to prevent DApps to interact with it. So at the end of the day, they both have the same objective, but with different characteristics. So they are very good solutions, but just for different use cases. You can scan this QR code to learn more about relayer services. There is a video that I made, which is a workshop in order to create your own relayer service. And you can also scan this other QR code that will link you to our browser extension. You can download it and try out how it looks like. It comes up directly integrated with its own relayer service, so you can start using it very easily and for free because we subsidize this relayer. So thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to talk to you today. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now or in person later. Thank you.
Any question in the audience?
Hi. So DApps which will use which will get the gas fees sponsored, the DApps offer, like, do the users need to log in with the LUKSO universal profile in order to do that? Is it like a wallet connect or?
Yeah, exactly. It works like this. You log in through Wallet Connect in the browser extension, and then the DApps can directly interact with the browser extension, just like with MetaMask.
So this means that the DApp which interact with the wallet, with the universal profile, gets the fees paid from the DApp site itself, while in the ERC 4337 version, it's not like that, right?
Well, it's not the DApp that pays for the fees, it's more the relayer service that the developer is running as well that is paying for the transaction fees.
All right, thank you.
So, for example, if your user has a subscription to another relayer service, and your DApp doesn't run its own relayer service, the user can still benefit from Gasless experience because they can choose their own relayer service to pay for it. Okay, nice.
Any other question?
Yeah, I have one question regarding the universal profiles. So the underlying tag is the ERC 725 standard, which it's built upon, right? And I was wondering, could it be possible to create a universal profile on other EVMs, which is kind of bare bone, just to have a smart contract account system also on other EVMs? Because everyone is looking for a solution to have smart wallets, actually, right now.
Yeah, of course, you can deploy universal profile on any EVM chain. That's completely possible.
And how would it actually then look like? How would a universal profile then on other chains look like without your specific standards?
I mean, it will be these standards, but just deployed on a different chain. And then you can use our browser extension to interact with it on any chain.
Okay, thank you. So the functionalities would, frankly, then stay on those chains.
Can you say again?
So the functionalities that your universal profile has on LUKSO would stay then on the other chains as well?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Last question?
I'm curious, there's a lot of like smart wallets like Gnosis Safe. What was the motivation to build like your own like universal profile and standard?
Well, it was to build all the functionalities together because, for example, Gnosis Safe, it enabled multi-sig signatures, but not contract storage. So with universal profile, you already have everything out of one standard. So that was the idea.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.